In Unit 2, Section 2, we are looking at powers and exponents. So this is something you've probably seen a little bit of before, but we'll probably go more in depth than you have in the past. So the first thing we need to do is define a couple things. So a power is the result of repeated multiplication, which you've probably known, but maybe not put a definition to that in the past. We also need to talk about a base and an exponent, which is probably easiest shown by actually showing you the example. So in our example right here, 5 to the third, that whole thing is called our power. The 5 is the base, and the exponent is the 3. So the 5 is the base is the number that will get repeatedly multiplied. The exponent tells us how many times to multiply it. So the power 5 to the third power tells us to multiply 5 3 times. So in the next section where it says using exponents, we're going to write the product using an exponent. So right now these are all products because they're all multiplication, but we're going to write it using an exponent. So if you look at our first example, we're multiplying 43 times itself 4 times. So my power would be 43 to the fourth power. The next one is negative 100 times negative 100 times negative 100. So I need to keep the parentheses there. So that'd be negative 100 to the third power. As you'll see in the next two, we can also do this with variables. So for number 3, we have x multiplied by itself 5 times. So that would be x to the fifth power. And then on number 4, we have a 5, but then we have p multiplied by itself 3 times and t multiplied by itself 5 times. So the 5 out front just stays a 5, and then we have p to the third power and t to the fifth power. The next section tells us to write the power in words and as repeated multiplication. So the first one is 2.5 to the fourth power. So to write that in words, we're literally just going to write 2.5 to the fourth power. So then to write that as repeated multiplication, we're making it look like it looked in the first section. So that's 2.5 times 2.5 times 2.5 times 2.5. The next one is 9 to the sixth power. So if we're going to write that out in words, we're going to write 9 to the sixth power. And then if we're going to write that as repeated multiplication, we're going to do 9 times 9, 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, I'm going to have you guys do number 3 and number 4. Make sure you write it in words, and then also write it as repeated multiplication. The next section is on evaluating powers with variables. So it says evaluate each expression if x equals 2, y equals 3, and z equals 2.5. So in Unit 2, Section 1, we looked at evaluating expressions. This is the same thing. We're just dealing with variables now. So our first one says y to the fourth power. We're going to replace y with 3. So we'll have 3 to the fourth power. That means I'm doing 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 times 3 is 81. For number 2, we have 7x squared. So I have a 7. I'm going to plug in 2 for x, and then I have to the second power. Now something you need to be careful with here. This exponent 2 is only tied to whatever's directly in front of it. So in this case, that's the 2. So we need to do 2 squared first, which is 4, and then we'll do 7 times 4 and get 28. You do not multiply first and then do the exponent. On the next part, we have some equations we need to look at. So the first equation is to find the area of a square. That equation is just area equals side squared. So if this was a perfect square, I would just do the side length times the side length, or side squared. Our answer to any area problem is going to have the units of square units, so whatever it is. So let's say, for instance, that my square had a side length of 4. So I do 4 times 4 and get 16. And let's say it was 4 centimeters. So I do 16 centimeters squared. Or I could say 16 square centimeters. Either way. But when we have an area problem, we need to have the units squared. So then to find the volume of a cube is just the 3D version of a square. So to find volume, it's just going to be side cubed instead of side squared. And then when we get our answer, so say our cube also had side lengths of 4, so we would do 4 times 4 times 4. We wind up with 64 centimeters cubed then. Or we could say 64 cubic centimeters, either way. So again, area problems, our answers, the units are squared. Volume problems, the units are cubed. So if you look at number 1, it says find the area of a square with a side length of 8 inches. So we'll have a square, pretend that's a square. It's got 8 inches as side length. So we'll plug that into our formula. We'll get area equals 8 squared. So that's going to be 64 inches squared. Then it says the volume of a cube has a side length of 4 meters. So I actually already kind of did this one. We would plug in 4 cubed. That's going to give us 64. And in this case, we have meters cubed. Again, have to have the units and then have to have it squared or cubed depending on what type of equation it is. And then at the bottom of the notes, you have some review problems where you're just evaluating expressions, which we did in section 1. Again, just plugging, replacing the variable with the number that goes with it. So make sure you do those as well before you move on. And as always, if you have any questions, just ask your teacher. All right, that's it for the Unit 2, Section 2 video.